The BTC break is about to come. Let's break down the chart and analyze what can happen. What's up, gang? It is I, Carlton Flowers, your crypto pro.
Yay!
And I am back with an analysis of this critical moment that we are just about to embark upon with BTC coming to the point of this triangle consolidation. So we're all wondering, is it going to break up or is it going to break down? Now, what I'm going to do is pull up the chart and with no practice and just look at the indicators of what we have on the screen to tell you what my thoughts are. And this is not a prediction video. This is just analysis. We're going to break it down and just look at what the possibilities are, what the probabilities are based on what the indicators are telling us right now. So let's jump into it. In fact, I've waited to do this because I didn't want to do something prematurely. For the last several days, we've had this debate going back and forth, and I didn't want to jump in and talk about what my thoughts are before we have enough data close enough to the apex of that triangle that we really can get a good idea of what is going to happen. So let's just pull up the chart. Here we go right here, and then we'll take off my handsome face and let's just look at what we have on the 4-hour first, and then we'll break this down on the 1-day chart. So with the 4-hour chart, what are we looking at right here? I've got my little triangle that I've made, and it's different than some other people's, and we can see that we had a little break, but it wicked out and jumped right back up to the base of this triangle, this pennant formation. At first I was going to adjust this down, and I thought, well, let me just leave it and see what happens. And sure enough, the 4-hour candles after we broke and wicked through, they're still right there on the bottom of the triangle leg. So that's a pretty good drawing here, a pretty good baseline. So we're going to just stick with that. Now, as far as the indicators on the 4-hour chart, First and foremost, we will look at the stochastic right here. It looks like a crossover is right about to happen. Look at that. With the %K line, the fast line is about to cross over the %D, the slow line. In fact, it's touching it right now. So if this does cross over, of course, that would mean we could have a little bit of a cycle down right here, but it doesn't mean that that is the break point. We could cycle back up and do another one of these. And what we always look for is what is the price that is returned from each one of these stochastic peaks. Now, let's look back in history. On this peak here, what do we return price-wise? There's a high. It's not really a higher high, but it is a high. And let's move on to the next one. Let's see what we have at this peak. We returned this high, a little bit of a higher high. And then we did a double hump camel, came back up with this peak and posted another higher high. And then our next stochastic peak didn't give us as big of a pop, but it did have a nice price movement, even though it was a lower high. So then we dipped all the way down here to the bottom, but notice that we didn't break the bottom of this triangle leg, okay, with the bottom of that stochastic. It's staying in the range. Next peak up, we got a little bump right here. And then on the big one, when we jumped all the way into the oversold zone, what did we return? A lower high. It didn't push us up that far. So then we had this nice movement here, another peak that stayed above the line for 3 little humps. I don't know if those are big enough humps to call it a camel, but let's just look and see. We returned a high, and then a higher high with a declining stochastic peak, and yet another higher high with a declining stochastic peak, and then it petered out. The next bump right here, we get a lower high. Are you starting to get the picture here? So on this dip here, we have yet another lower high, and we're hanging out at the bottom end of the triangle boundary. So there we have it. Let's erase this so we can make sense of it. So as we're bouncing around here, we're getting full stochastic cycles up and down. But then up on the price range, we are not moving out of the formation. And that is why it might be premature until we get very close to the end of this formation. Right there at the apex, or we're going to know which way this thing is going to break. Now, let's look at the MACD on the 4-hour. We see here that the fast line and the slow line are approaching each other, and we are printing negative bars on the histogram, kind of floating around here, but we're headed back towards the 0 line, which tells me that there is a possibility that we could start printing some bars on the histogram in the positive. But will it be enough? When we get to the peak of this, what is it going to return up here in the price line? It's probably going to be right here in the middle of the triangle. So this coiling up move is just continuing. And then I'm going to be watching to see once this rounds down and then it starts in the next cycle and starts to print bars in the negative, maybe we'll see the major breakout. Now the oscillators on the MACD here, we see that we had this deep dip when we had the low point, when everybody was shaking in their shoes. And then as we come back up, we take another dip and then we jump into the positive. And so now we're on the cycle where there's a dip. It could move up here into the positive and kind of do this. But then once we get to the end of this triangle, that's going to be the moment of truth. So I can't really tell much here on the 4-hour yet of which way this thing is going to break, because overall, all we're getting is this big movement that just tends to get smaller and smaller as we approach the 0 line. And then at the end of this point here, right here, it's either going to be a massive break to this direction or a massive break to that direction. And all that we have to go by right now is the fact that the point of control price at 37,820 is what the price line is gravitating towards before we have this big break move. With that point of control price, we just are going up and down. It's oscillating right around the center of the point of control price right there. And then we can expect that break to go up or down. So that's the 4-hour chart. Too early to tell. We can't tell anything. Let's jump to the 1-day chart and see if we can get some evidence from it. Here it is, 1-day chart. Now let's scrunch this down so we can see a little bit better. And here we have our triangle formation right here. And we can see the big old point of control price sticking out like a sore thumb right there. And now here we get to see what possible price targets that there could be if we break to the upside or the downside. So first, with the upside, if we break up, we could look towards this volume node cluster on the VPVR, or it could even be as high as this cluster here. On the negative side, well, we've got this big one right here, somewhere around, what is that, 23,000. That's significant. And then we have the other great big one down here at the point of control price of this chart in this range. This POC changes depending on how much history that you have pulled in. But this one is just above 20,000. So I'm hearing a lot of people on the YouTubes that are talking about 23K, which is somewhere right here. I can't tell it with the drawing mode on. Let's see here. Let's clear this out, turn drawing mode off, and look what this node price is. There's the node right there, 23K. So that coincides with a lot of what we're hearing. Point of control price is sitting at 19,257. There is a CME gap below 20,000 that we all have forgotten about, that we thought that we would never come back again and fill. And now we see that there is a possibility that that CME gap could fill. So let's jump back onto the drawing mode here and take a look at the stochastic. This is nasty. We have a crossover. In fact, let's make that red. Here we go. The stochastic has peaked here on the 1 day, right at this peak price here. And now the fast line is on a steep angle downward. All right, so looking at the previous peak right here and right here, it returned this price on this pump and then a higher high on this pump. We definitely have a lower high with this stochastic peak right here of where we sit on the 1 day chart. All right, now let's look at the MACD. It's a little bit different of a picture. Although we have the fast line and the slow line, the oscillators are moving upwards. They do look like they have some momentum up, and we can't really tell they're moving in parallel. There is a gap there. This could continue up and then it could cycle down, but it could also just take another nosedive down. There's no guarantee that we make a perfect cycle up like this and a perfect one down. In a perfect world, we could have that, but this is not the case. Looking at the history of this, we see that we had this nice movement up. We dipped down, but then it took another run up, and it stayed above the zero line all the way until the middle of, or the end of April. So by the beginning of May, we have this movement where the oscillators are staying below that zero line. So overall, let's just make an overall line here. It's headed in this direction. Here's the momentum, guys. There it is right there. So let's clear that out and look at the histogram. So the histogram right now, let's make that a little thinner. The histogram is printing green bars. But what do you notice? We've got the light green, which means there's a reversal in the direction of the histogram. So that means that as the histogram is heading to the zero line, even though these oscillators are trying to move up, we could very well start to print negative bars on the histogram. Now, based on that, I would say that there's a slight chance that this movement could continue and we could dip down into the oversold zone on the stochastic. If this cycle completes and we move all the way down, and if this histogram takes a negative dip and starts to print red bars, my guess is going to be that we're going to be headed toward this volume node right here. So I'm going to tip this 50-50 shot in favor of the bears. And there's one other big, huge, glaring piece of evidence on this chart that says that the probability is more bearish than bullish. Now, can you guess what that is? There's one thing that I've left out, and that would be the 200-day or the 200 period. It is day because this is the day chart. The 200-day and the 50-day EMA lines. What do we have up here? They're approaching each other, and we could have a death cross. Now, I don't talk about death crosses on the 4-hour because that's a faster chart, and it usually doesn't turn out that a 4-hour death cross is indicative of a major swing in direction. But on the 1-day chart, if we get a death cross, it's usually an indication of a major swing of the trading channel. So all we need to see here is if this 50-day EMA continues down, which the indication is that it will, and the 200 is on a slight decline, it's looking like it'll do something like this, okay? Let's, in fact, draw that with a line. Let's just take a line and make our first one in orange. We'll extend this. This one has a pretty good velocity heading downwards. And then let's take the blue line, the percent. Let's see, that's not a percent K. I'm sorry. This is the 200 period EMA. If it continues on with slight negative direction, we're going to get a death cross pretty soon here. And that will be somewhere out here in, say, the middle of June. So we might have a couple of weeks before this confirms it, but the break is going to come before that. If we do break to the downside, if this happens and we fall out of the bottom of that triangle, this death cross is going to be rock solid, 100% going to happen. We'll get it. And then that will confirm the overall downward movement where we could end up hitting this 23,000 node here, or we could hit the 19,132 node right here at the point of control. The question that remains, does this nullify the bull market? In my opinion, no, it does not. Why? Well, here's why. The overall movement might be down. We're headed down, kind of like this. But then we look at the big picture. Let's clear this out and let's just pull in some more price data and scrunch this down. Here's where you'll see it. Now, let's draw a line. Let's make a price line. We'll put it in red. And we'll take the price down here. Whoops, that's too heavy. Let's take the price line breaking out of this candle. And let's say if it moves down like this and we drop down to say 20K. We'll just make it 20K. Worst case scenario. What do you see here? Overall, are we still in an uptrend or a downtrend? Well, it looks to me that as we're moving here, if we have an overall average, if we did hit 20,000, the trend is still up, guys. It's still up. What could happen after this point? We could have a major move or say a little bit of a consolidation. If we start to bounce around and the average continues to move up, I would say we are absolutely still in the bull market. And then we could look for something big happening with a parabolic move headed into the fall. Now, again, that's just my opinion. I'm not saying that this is going to happen, and it's not a prediction. This is analysis, period. We're analyzing the chart to get an idea based on the indicators of right now, today, of where it could go. Once we get data after this point, this chart will look different. And as the data continues on, it can change this. That's why it's a day-to-day basis. And that's why I don't make overarching predictions that tell you, oh, this is absolutely going to happen. A smart trader will look at the data as it occurs and be ready to change your strategy as things happen. Now, if this is the case, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. If this is the movement that we're going to see in BTC, I'm probably going to sell a lot of alts and take profits because I have been greedy and I should have taken profits way back up here while BTC was doing this chopping around. That's where I should have sold some alts. The good rule is that you sell half of a position once you double, and then you're free. You're on free coins after that point. I kept everything. I'm up 10x on a whole bunch of projects. Up here, oh man, it was probably 15 to 20x. But where we sit right now at this point in the alts that I hold, and I've got a lot, I'm at least a 10x on half or more of those positions. So what should I do right now? I should sell half, take profits, and wait and see what happens. Now, if I sell half or even say 100% of the certain alts that I'm up 10x, and then let's say if we break to the upside, well, I'm not crying. Those alts are going to come up, but I've got profit. So why complain? You can't make perfect decisions and predict every move. You want to get out of this with some money in your pocket, or at least I do, because the kids need shoes. I got college tuitions to pay. All right. So I would rather play it safe, put some money in my pocket, and then wait and watch what happens. But back to my strategy. If we dip down here, I'm selling some right now. I'm going to decide as soon as we get confirmation on this break, I'm going to unload a lot of alts and wait for the market to settle down. And then what am I going to do? Accumulation mode all throughout this period right here. I'm going to start picking up alts, a lot of the projects in my research project list and my meme list, which I'm going to have a meme video coming out soon. And then I'll wait for this rise to happen. So I remain unconvinced that this is the end of the market cycle because we haven't had a market cycle decrease in time since the advent of crypto. They only get longer. So I'm going to place my bets on the fact that this market cycle, for this bull market, this entire cycle is going to be longer than the last. And if that's the case, then maybe we'll see this. But that's my thoughts. What are your thoughts? I want to know what you are thinking about the break and what your strategy is so you can put money in your pocket and be safe. Do you have a risk management plan? How are you managing the risk of investing in this market? My other piece of advice for you is be careful and do not invest money that you don't have the ability to afford to lose. All right. And on top of that, don't buy at market peaks. You should be buying during the dog days, like down here. Don't be buying up here. If you're late to the game, slow your roll. Be careful. Play it safe. And this is not financial advice. None of this is. If you listen to me, you could be the next one standing in the soup line because you're a homeless bum living out of a box on the side of the road. That's all I got. This is Carlton Flowers, your crypto plo. Thank your crypto plo. That's my new name. I'm the crypto plo. So like and subscribe, tell a friend, and come and chop it up with us in the Telegram group, and we'll talk about this further. That's all. I'm out.